Why don't we go ahead and get started? We're straight up 12 noon Central. I want to welcome everyone to this year's year-end webinar series. And what I'd like to do before we get started is just introduce myself and then talk about some housekeeping items. My name is Dave McEwen. I'm the Managing Director for Sikich's HR Advisory Services. And today we'll have a panel of our consultants address several of these talent issues and challenges that you're facing. But before we get started, I just want to go through some housekeeping reminders. First and foremost, it's really important that you submit any questions, and we encourage you to submit questions throughout via the question feature on the webinar control panel. And if your question cannot be addressed during the presentation, our team will go ahead and follow up with you after the webinar. This webinar is part of our year-end payroll and beyond webinar series. And after today's session, we will have one more in the series, and it's titled Attracting and Retaining Top Talent in a Tight Labor Market. So more information will be given to you following this, this presentation in an email. The presentation slides that you're going to see today can be downloaded from the handout section of the webinar control panel. And then throughout the session today, we're going to be asking poll questions. These are needed so that you can receive CPE and HRCI credits. And then we will try to answer those as they're received. And then at the conclusion of the webinar, a short survey will launch, and people will need to complete it for them to get the credits. And then the certificates will be mailed out to you in 2 to 3 weeks. So that's enough about the housekeeping. What I'd like to do is let you know that our team of HR Advisory Services is very excited to share with you some of the insights that they have going into 2022. We've helped dozens of clients address their unique talent challenges in 2021, and we're prepared to do so again in 2022. And what we're seeing already is it's shaping up to be another very demanding year. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to our first consultant, Violet Balulis, to discuss what she's seeing in 2022 regarding workforce compliance. Violet, it's all yours. It is if I
advance the slides, Dave.
Sorry.
I think you didn't advance the slides.
Here we go.
So hi, my name is Violet. I am going to be talking about compliance today. The pandemic has definitely taken over our compliance focus in the last couple of years, and that will definitely remain our focus in the coming at least year as well. So we're definitely going to spend some time today talking about what that impact is going to look like. Here we have our first poll question. In 2022, where will your focus be concerning workforce compliance? And you can select multiple answers. First one being revamping policies to address in-person or hybrid workforce, ethics and compliance training, local or state regulatory changes, and workplace safety. And we'll give you guys a few seconds here to respond. Revamping policies to address in-person or hybrid workforce, definitely, and ethics and compliance training, as well as local and state regulatory changes. It feels like we're all over the board which is what we expected. We're definitely going to talk about all of these today and hopefully provide you some great insights. Dave, if you want to move on to the next slide. All right, so we have all been navigating as best as we can through the COVID-19 vaccination mandate and quarantine requirements in the last couple of years. And we need to make sure that we still remain well informed moving into 2022 of federal, state, local, and OSHA guidelines. When we're taking into consideration these guidelines, we need to take a look at what is our business type, consider the industry that we're operating in, and the type of employees that we are employing. Are they frontline workers? Are we asking our employees to be face-to-face working with our clients and customers, as well as working together with each other in person? Or do we have more of a hybrid remote workforce? We also need to consider the size of our businesses. Regardless of the size of businesses, I do want to recommend, if you haven't done so already, to begin, I think it's a good idea to begin collecting vaccination status information from our employees, only because the CDC guidelines and requirements are now starting to take into consideration the status of vaccination for employees into their guidelines and requirements when it comes to exposure and quarantining guidelines. OSHA still continues to highly recommend and encourage employers to encourage their employees to get vaccinated, to provide them the proper time off needed to obtain vaccination, to make sure that they have set guidelines on mask wear, social distancing, as well as good hygiene, as well as have a good process in place for what to do when there is a positive COVID case in the workplace. We do have various testing options now, and we need to make sure that that we know what options we're going to be offering our employees. For example, are we going to be accepting take-home test results, or are we going to be requiring PCR testing? And then we have to have somebody who will monitor these, an individual at our organization. And when it comes to religious exemptions, if we're an employer that will require our employees to get vaccinated, we need to consider the fact that we are going to receive some religious exemption requests, and those often are complicated and very sensitive. When we receive such a request, we need to engage in a conversation with that employee to determine that in fact is a sincere, it's coming from a sincere religious belief. That request is coming from a sincere religious belief and is not based on political beliefs or just a fear of the vaccine and of effects of the vaccine. Once we've determined that the request is sincere, then we need to engage in a dialogue to determine reasonable accommodations we can provide that employee, and if those reasonable accommodations would pose an undue hardship on our business or harm to others. When it comes to record retention, copies of vaccination cards and test results that we obtain from our employees need to be kept very confidential and stored in the employee's medical file, separate from the employee file. And then we are definitely going to see an impact on other company policies as well. For example, if we are going to mandate the vaccine for our employees, a really good idea for us to have a vaccination policy. Good idea for us to have a reasonable accommodations policy, among other policies that we may already be working on, such as work from home, telecommuting, and I'm sure there will be a lot of updates that we'll need to make to our leave policies as well, as states are adding those requirements as well. Our benefit programs will definitely continue to be impacted, especially since now our workplace is moving to a more remote permanent. We need to take a look at our benefit plans and determine if that is still what our employees are finding valuable. So as our employees are working remote, they don't have to report to a physical location. They may decide that they want to relocate, no longer want to live in the state where their business previously was based. And we need to take a look at our benefit offerings and make sure that we that our employees that are working in different states will have access to these same benefits as well. We'll talk about benefit programs in a little bit more in depth as well. But Dave, you can go ahead and move to the next slide. Thank you. Payroll will continue seeing an impact. There's been ongoing discussion regarding that taxation for teleworkers who now work from home in a different state. With benefits, as I mentioned, as states start adding requirements for paid sick leave, we may need to make updates on our paid leave programs. We see that employers are continuing to offer flexible working arrangements and work sites to their employees. Something new that we've seen is that employers are toying with the idea of upping benefit premiums for employees that are unvaccinated, very similar to what we've done for tobacco users in the past. Training, definitely moving to a more virtual platform. And then COVID is definitely affecting the focus of training topics, and that we are seeing training topics move to how to reduce the spread of COVID, what do I do if I'm sick, how do I manage a virtual team, how do I motivate my remote employee, among other trending topics, which we'll discuss in the next couple of slides. When it comes to handbook and company policies, I know I mentioned this briefly a little bit already, but implementing a telecommuting or work from home policy is very important, so we can set guidelines for our remote workers, as well as make sure that they do feel connected and engaged. Also, COVID-19 safety guidelines and policies, if we haven't done so already, very important to start drafting those policies and adding them to our handbooks. When it comes to processes and procedures, I'm sure a lot of these you have already been working on, but again, very important for us to set procedures on what our managers should do if their employee comes to them and says that they have tested positive. What are the disinfecting and cleaning procedures that will take place in the situation where an employee was working out of a physical work location and they tested positive for COVID? Make sure that we have those screening policies still, policies and procedures still in place and current. When it comes to recruiting, an update there, ICE has extended the Form I-9 flexibility deadline for virtual document inspection through April 22, and they are working on a more permanent guideline handbook or guideline that is set to be released sometime this summer, 2022. All right, Dave, you can go on to the next slide. As we are moving into 2022, I think that we all agree the OSHA CDC websites will still be our best friends. They remain to have very good guidelines for worker protection and workplace safety requirements. Looking at travel restrictions as we're planning our business travel in 2022 and what that's going to look like, it's a good idea to remain abreast of the different travel vaccine and testing requirements and the different destinations that we will be traveling to, as those are continually changing. And with historic unemployment levels still being really high, we're going to continue to see fraud schemes, and vulnerability to cybersecurity will be a big issue moving into 2022. I know that it's already kind of been an issue in the previous couple of years as well. Paid leave laws, as I mentioned before, many local governments and states have added COVID-related paid leave laws in 2021 that addressed sick time, family medical leave, and vaccination leave. And we are set to see more of the same in 2022 as well. So keep an eye out on that. You can go on to the next slide, Dave. And then lastly, I want to leave you with some things to monitor as we're moving into this next year. When it comes to technology, I think we all can agree that remote work is here to stay. So it is really important that employers do continue to look for ways to monitor remote work, improve and track productivity and performance remotely, and that they do make sure that their leaders are well aware of and equipped with the tools to manage productivity virtually, remotely. As training is moving to a more virtual platform, we need to make sure that our trainings are still remaining engaging, that we're still having participation by our employees and keeping them engaged during trainings. When it comes to staffing, burnout, emotional exhaustion, and anxiety is definitely going to remain a focus going into 2022, as we have employees that are very anxious to return to work on site. We have burnout of employees that are working remotely but are still struggling to determine what that barrier is between work life and family life. When does work life stop and family life start? It's really easy for us to move into that burnout. So, encourage your managers and leaders to be in constant contact with their employees and to support them and to provide words of encouragement for them throughout the year. Cultural impact will remain very important. A positive culture attracts good candidates, and employees that are happy are less likely to look for alternative employment. So it's a good idea to really have a pulse on our employees and how they're feeling and how we can support them. Something that I've recommended to clients in the past is have a pulse survey go out once or twice a year to see how's your workforce doing. Is there anything that we are not currently doing that we can be doing to support them more? Measuring productivity and performance. Again, make sure our managers are equipped with the tools to measure productivity and performance virtually, and also how is our productivity matrix going to be adjusted, taking into consideration closures, quarantining, leaves of employees, and how's that going to be adjusted and taken into consideration. Job descriptions. Take a look at job descriptions, make sure that key responsibilities haven't changed, especially since some jobs now have moved to a more permanent remote. And then cybersecurity, again, that is going to be a huge threat for 2022, very important. I do have read about some states also toying with the idea with mandating cybersecurity training for employers, and also mandating reporting of breaching instances, but more to come on that. But I think we can all agree that it's made it harder for us to control confidential company information and the keeping of confidential company information when we have remote employers and a lot of workers working remotely. When it comes to communication, still make sure we have open tools and channels for employees to provide us with feedback. Make sure managers are communicating with their staff frequently, and you are being very transparent and open with your employees on what your company's state is going to look like moving forward, so they can know where their job security stands. Lastly, on handbooks, I know that we're all guilty of drafting policies really quickly in the last couple of years as we've been trying to put out fires, and we've been providing those policies to our employees via memos, and those maybe have been COVID-specific crisis policies, but take a look at those policies again. Are any of them here to stay even post-COVID? It's always a good idea to take a look at our handbooks and manuals at least once a year and determine if some of these policies do need to be incorporated in the more permanent handbook manual for our employees. The training topics that we see trending in 2022, I have listed here. One that's been here and will remain here since it's an Illinois requirement is the anti-harassment training. Make sure we are staying up to date on that and it's not getting forgotten with the whole COVID crisis. We do need to make sure that our employees are, if you are in Illinois, you are providing that training to our employees annually. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a very trending topic, and it will remain trending in 2022, as well as managing in a crisis and remote workforce. With benefits, as I mentioned before, we need to just start getting more creative before, it was always important to have an employee assistance program, but it's a lot even more important now that employees are dealing with COVID and working in this crisis type of environment. Make sure that we have the proper mental and behavioral health programs available to employees and wellness programs. Again, being a little more creative. It was as easy as providing a discount at the local gym 2 years ago, but now we need to think out of the box and maybe my husband's company, for example, is providing a discount on Peloton bikes or treadmills and a free subscription to the Peloton app. That's something that employees can take advantage of remotely. Another good idea is contribute or provide a discount to a Weight Watchers program, to a monthly massage therapy membership. If an employee is interested in running in a marathon, sponsor that marathon for them. And then finally, looking at the litigation landscape, the Department of Labor and OSHA violations continue to be on the rise. We are seeing a lot of claims that are related to terminations and retaliations. With that being said, I want to remind you that it's always been important, but even more important now, to document all the conversations with our employees. Make sure that you're remaining consistent from one situation to the next, and your approach is consistent with employees, as well as make sure that you are enforcing policies. That is all that I had on compliance, Dave. All right.
Perfect. Patty, I think you're up for talent management.
There we go. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Violet. Appreciate that update. I want to transition us to discussing talent management. Let's do a quick poll. When you think about your organization's approach to talent management, where do you think you lie on the spectrum of being proactive, meaning your talent management efforts are aligned to your strategic business plans, reactive, you find that you struggle to stay ahead of the game in terms of managing your talent, or maybe you feel that you're blended. You have a plan, but often firefighting and other pressing matters take priority. So let's take a moment, and if everyone could respond, that would be great. Okay, so what we're seeing, and this is what I expected, is a good portion of you are taking the steps to plan, but then other priorities take place of the time you had dedicated to talent management. Some are reactive, right? You're just struggling to keep your head above water in terms of talent, and forward thinking in terms of how you're going to manage your people. And then there is a group of you that feel that you are proactive and you're able to keep your heads above water, which is fantastic. Let's transition and talk a little bit more about what we're seeing and what we anticipate for 2022. So as many of you are experiencing right now, organizations are going to continue to be stretched in talent and challenged in terms of talent management. And we're seeing more and more that new skills and competencies are needed by organizations to allow your organization and your people to thrive. And here's an example. competencies like agility, resiliency, and adaptability are becoming more and more important in terms of your leadership management and your individual contributors. Many organizations are going to need to define or continue to redefine their people plan, including different ways to develop your employees to ensure that they are growing their skills. So, this leads to tough questions such as, for a manager development, what skills are needed to support a remote or a hybrid workforce? And, how do you train for traits such as resiliency or empathy, for example? Another trend that we continue to see is the need to automate talent management so that you can most effectively track and manage the talent of your workforce. And this includes things, tracking things such as talent acquisition, employee onboarding, performance management, and succession planning, and having those all integrated into manageable systems that work for your organization. Some other considerations for this coming year: talent retention. So the employees that you have today are becoming more and more the employees that you need. As we all know, and Laura's going to spend more time on this, but filling talent gaps has been incredibly challenging over the past year or so. So things to think about is, are you competitive, for example, in spaces such as compensation? And how do you know if you're competitive? A lot of organizations may bypass doing things such as market surveys. And you want to make sure that you are keeping a pulse on the market. You know what the going rate is for talent in your region and across the US. Another consideration is, do you have career progression tracks within your organization, right? There needs to be a line of sight for employees so that they know they can grow and expand in their careers. And assuming you do have those in place, are employees aware that you have them? A lot of organizations will spend time on putting career tracks in place, but employees don't hear about them. And one way you can overcome that is by celebrating promotions, for example, and communicating them broadly. Employee engagement continues to be an important trend in talent management, and keeping in mind that engagement goes far beyond retention. It has to do with job satisfaction. Do employees feel that they're valued and heard? Are they connected to their manager and to their teammates? And that becomes even more challenging in hybrid and remote environments. So considerations for this coming year include, as Violet mentioned, different and creative ways to handle employee burnout. And do employees feel that their overall well-being is being supported? Performance management has to do with the driving higher levels of employee performance in terms of measurable results, but also qualitative results, and demonstrating culture and values that are important to your organization. So think about, does your organization hold people accountable for what you expect them to achieve? And more and more organizations are trending away from an annual performance review into more and even mobilized ways of providing continuous feedback, discussions on results, and development with employees. The last thing I want to bring up is succession planning. Right before COVID hit, this was a very hot topic, and we were doing a lot of work with organizations who were beginning to realize that they needed to plan for the appropriate successors for not just their leadership teams, but the next 1 or 2 levels down within the organization. Since COVID has hit, a lot of organizations have not been able to keep the necessary focus on succession planning, which is understandable, right? We've all been fighting fires for the past 2 years now, but the fact remains that the workforce continues to age. People are thinking of there's retirement plans. So we strongly recommend that you dust off your succession planning documents or take the time to put them in place, including career development plans for your high potential employees that might be eager to move up into higher levels of leadership, as well as critical expertise types of roles. And another thing to think about is, does your diversity and inclusion plan align with your cultural and organizational values? And is that reflected in your succession plan? Right, this is where the rubber tends to hit the road, so to speak, in terms of diversity and inclusion. Are you putting people who reflect your customer base in key leadership and management positions? So a lot to think about for this year. I'm going to transition it over to Laura. She's going to spend some time on a really important topic that I'm sure you've all been struggling with, which is talent attraction. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Patty. Yeah, rolling right into talent attraction, we are going to talk about some of the major trends that we've seen in 2022, and then also our recommendations for really a sustainable way to get through the next year or two. And starting out with the poll question, we're looking to get a pulse on where everyone expects to be in 2022 in terms of their recruiting and hiring outlook. So if you can choose one of the following options that best describes your recruiting and workforce outlook, and those options are: maintain, we will fill vacancies as needed due to turnover; grow, we will add new positions to support growing business needs; transform, we have plans for reorganization and upskilling, whether it be across the business or within critical areas of the business; or unsure/other. So we'll give you a minute to submit your answer here. All right, a good mix. So it looks like about half of the group, 51% says they are planning on maintaining, filling vacancies as needed due to turnover. About 1/3 of the group, 33%, says they're looking to grow. There will be new positions added to support growing needs. And then a small group, about 16%, who will transform or unsure other. Great. Well, as we get right into it, you know, companies are, a third of your organizations are looking to grow, and this is something that we've been seeing really across the market and across industries. Companies are really trying to get back to their pre-pandemic growth and are focused on increasing headcount. So combined with that and job seekers having more options, there's a lot of challenges for employers. And we've seen, you know, in 2022, the pandemic has fundamentally changed the labor market. It is a classic supply and demand equation here. There's an increased demand for talent and a decreased available talent pool. So what we have is a shortage. You know, going back to Econ 101, you have the shortage there, or as we call it in HR, a talent gap. So just looking at the data, 4.5 million workers quit their jobs in November 2021. I believe that number was about the same or even a bit higher for December. That number came from Bureau of Labor Statistics. And with 4.5 million workers quitting their jobs, there were 10.56 million job openings in November 2021. So as you can see, you know, even for the portion of folks in that 4.5 million who are going to another job, that's still far less than there are openings. But we've also seen a sharp decrease in labor force participation. The latest data from the U.S. Department of Labor shows that there are approximately 4.2 million fewer workers in the labor force compared to 2019 prior to the pandemic. And the labor force participation rate is lower than it has been any time in the past 20 years. A lot of this, the data shows this is women in the workplace. Only 56% of American women are working for pay, which is the lowest level since 1986. So stresses and impacts of the pandemic and childcare and schooling have all really contributed to this. But, in addition to, I think, the factors that have played a part in people leaving, the burnout that we've seen, people tired from the stress, it's being coined as COVID burnout. It also is a really interesting shift that we've seen in the mindset of employees, candidates. They've just really, a lot of people have taken a step back to reevaluate their lives, their jobs, their careers. I think over, the past 2 years, which has been pretty turbulent, many people have lost loved ones. It really forced people to reevaluate what they want out of their job, what they want for themselves. A lot of people changing career paths, a lot of people who have left industries that suffered the most, so hospitality, restaurant business, and decided to pursue something more that they viewed as more stable. So all of these factors have really, really contributed to this, really extreme case where employees are in the driver's seat. And we've been saying this for a couple of years, right? It's a candidate market. It is not just a candidate market. I mean, the candidates are in control. I saw a quote that was in the latest Sure magazine subscription, and it said that there is definitely a war for talent, and even more than that, it's an arms race to attract talent. So we're beyond the war. This is all about attracting talent and really what we recommend doing. So a lot of organizations are going to kind of some unconventional practices and trying to compete for a wage from a wage perspective, offering signing bonuses, paying over market to steal talent. We've seen a lot of these strategies being used, and while they may be a temporary fix, they're not sustainable. The signing bonuses, I've heard of companies who are paying very substantial signing bonuses for employees to leave their employer without giving 2 weeks notice. So, I mean, just some of these really unique, circumstances that are driving this behavior. And while, as Patty mentioned, we always recommend, frequently reviewing your wage structure and wage rates and philosophy. You need to be, benchmarking against the industry to make sure that you're competitive. We really recommend and believe that there's much more to it than that. You're not going to win the competition for talent with just dollars, right? So you have to really think about almost what I would say going back to the basics, but also some new concepts, or maybe for some of you newer as well. And that's employer branding, streamlining and focusing on the candidate experience, being open to more flexible and alternative work arrangements, and really taking a look and hiring for potential. And, as Patty mentioned, what are those competencies that are going to be core and needed for your workforce for the next 5-10 years? Those may be different than they were before. So as we look at kind of these 4 areas, and just want to highlight, why they're important, and a couple of key considerations for you. So, as we just discussed, looking at the numbers, there's 10.5 million job openings. We just had 4 million, over 4 million individuals leave the labor force, you need to stand out as an employer. You need to have really strong employer branding and stand out as a great place to work, to even be considered by top talent. So some of these things include having a clear value proposition, knowing your target market, and knowing your talent competitors. You need to know what your employer value proposition is. All of your managers and employees need to know what that is, and you need to be communicating it. So sharing that messaging online, sharing that with candidates, potential candidates, schools, wherever you recruit or look for talent. And that's going to be something that is unique to you, and that your talent competitors do not offer. So hey, we offer great benefits and competitive wages. That's great. So do all of your competitors. Oh, we offer, flexibility. Again, more and more organizations are offering that. So really determining what makes you unique. Is it your culture? Is it your exceptional management training program? What is it that makes you unique, and selling that, having that really woven into every part of your process. The second is candidate experience. And, this has been a hot topic for a couple of years, but it's even more important now because candidates have 3 or 4 offers in their hand. When they're ready to make a move, the top candidates are choosing between multiple offers. They are going to view your hiring and recruiting process as reflective of your workplace. So if it's unorganized, if there's a lack of communication or misinformation shared with them, inconsistencies, they're going to view that as how it is to work for you. So you really need to make sure you have a well-defined hiring process before you start recruiting. Be transparent with candidates, communicate clear and consistent messaging so they know what they can expect. Move quickly. As I said, they have multiple offers. They're not staying on the market for long. If you know that you want to hire a candidate, extend an offer. There is no more, we'll get back to you next week. That candidate's gone. So just really being mindful of that. And I always say this, treat candidates as you would your customers or your clients. Treat them better than you would your customers or your clients. You wouldn't just let a message from one of your customers sit in your inbox for a week and a half. So don't do that to a candidate. The third area is flexibility and openness. Recent LinkedIn data showed that 87% of workers would prefer to work in a remote or hybrid setting. 87% of workers would prefer that. So if you can be more open to flexibility, and this includes not just remote or hybrid work arrangements, but part-time positions, job sharing, flexible schedule, 4-day work weeks, you are going to capture 87% more candidates than you would if you are not open to those things and you're, the traditional on-site 5 days a week. Candidates really want the flexibility. It's really, that's probably the biggest change that we've seen from a candidate perspective, is that's become their number one priority. So that's certainly something you need to be talking about with your leadership team, and really taking a close look at some creative arrangements if you can. And lastly, hiring for potential and culture. Again, going back to the data, there's a labor and talent shortage. So there are more openings than there are people with the skills. If you have the option to hire a high potential candidate with little to no experience today, do it, because the alternative is searching for another 2 or 3 months for someone with experience, and you could have someone on board who's already onboarded and ramped up. Really looking for those competencies, as Patty mentioned, the cultural competencies, adaptability, resilience, those are things that it's hard to train. And if you come across candidates who show all of the potential, but they're lacking the experience, this is the best time to hire those folks. They're going to be a better long-term fit. It's more work in the front end. You're going to have to train them and perhaps show them more attention at first than you would someone who has a couple of years of experience, but it's going to really, we've seen it be really successful in the long run in situations where they're a good cultural fit, they're hired for potential. Just make sure you keep training them and ensuring that you're communicating a career path so that those high potential employees stay and you can really get the return on investment out of all that training you put in. Last note, I'll say keeping and training your current employees is much less expensive than hiring new ones. So just think about, all of the development opportunities and really, holistic kind of candidate employee development that you can offer as an organization. And those were the kind of main areas I wanted to hit on for talent attraction. So I will hand it back over to you, Dave.
Great, thank you. Before I want to talk a little bit about my team here, Violet, Patty, and Laura. Thank you so much for that. It kind of goes back to what several of you were talking about, which is your culture. And Sikich's culture is we hire very practical, smart, hardworking people. And I love working with Violet, Patty, and Laura because of that. And that's the services that we provide. We provide this practical, deep HR experience with our clients, especially those clients that either don't have the capacity or they don't have the expertise trying to handle their unique talent needs. So as you saw, we can handle everything from, I like to say, hire to retire, from recruitment, talent management, compliance, compensation, change management, and everything in between. So again, I want to thank Violet, Patty, and Laura for your insights. And what I'd like to do is we do have some questions that have come through. So I'd like to go ahead and take those and have our panel here answer them. So I've got a couple on talent acquisition, Laura. The first one is, what's the one area of talent acquisition that you feel would be the biggest impact on attracting talent?
I think outside of flexibility and offering that, again, that has become such a big priority. So offering that flexibility, but outside of that, I would say employer branding. That's how you're going to attract candidates to even come to the table to have a conversation. Having a great experience, candidate experience and process and all of that, that's great once you get the candidates there, but without employer branding and really, having a strong employer value proposition, you're not even going to get candidates to the table. So I would say that combined with flexibility would probably be the biggest areas.
Yeah, that 87% was quite a big figure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just again, a reminder, if you haven't asked a question and you'd like to, please go into the chat box and you can ask your question. I'm going to change it up a little bit and I'll come back to you, Laura, but Violet, I've got a question about I-9s. And the question is this, can you go over the remote inspection of I-9s? It does not seem to make sense if businesses are open, but conducting orientations remotely to reduce the spread of the virus. We should be able to inspect remotely. So any comments you can make on that?
So as far as inspecting I-9s remotely, the current guidance that we've received from ICE is that for any employees that are hired to work exclusively in a remote setting due to COVID-19, those temporarily exempt physical inspection requirements are in place. So if this employee that was hired is going to be taking on a remote work position, then go ahead and inspect their documents virtually. If they will be reporting at a location on a more hybrid schedule, then I would recommend that we take a look at their documents physically.
Great, thank you. And I think you mentioned earlier that those are going to be reevaluated in April.
Yeah, currently they expire in April, but they are constantly being extended.
Yeah,
So we
great.
need to, take a look at that.
Thank you. And Laura, one last question that's come through. Can you share some other unique perks and benefits that employers can use to aid in the acquisition of talent?
Yeah, absolutely. So, unique perks were, I would say, kind of trendy a couple of years ago, and you saw companies rolling out pet insurance and some other kind of, unique lifestyle benefits is what I've heard them refer to as well. We're really seeing companies try to cater towards their target market and what their employees see as most valuable. So I would say it is dependent based on who you're looking to hire. If you're looking to hire a lot of entry level folks, they're going to have different, I think, priorities than more experienced hires. And some of the top ones that we hear when I talk to candidates every day, PTO is a huge one. So revisiting your PTO policies and benefit, making sure they're effective, leave benefits, and then also retirement. Again, depending on which spectrum you're hiring, I think those are two really big ones that it makes sense to take a look at.
Thank you. Just related on that note about time off, and then relating a little bit back to the mental health and the wellness of employees. Although it's not very frequent, but I have heard a number of clients will do paid time off sabbaticals at milestone marks at 5 years, 10 years, whereby they will offer 4 weeks of paid time off all in one lump in addition to their normal vacation and PTO to let them just really break away, delegate their work to others, and then go become more well. So again, those are the kinds of things that we're seeing clients starting to offer more of to attract the talent and keep the talent. So we're coming up on the hour now. So just in closing, first of all, I want to thank you all for attending. I hope you got a lot out of it today. As a reminder, you should complete the survey that will pop up after the webinar is over. For those questions that we weren't able to get to, we'll be able to follow up with you and address those questions as you put them in. And then, as I mentioned, the CPE and the HRCI credits will be sent to you via email in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So again, thank you for joining and have a wonderful week. Bye now.